welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Lexa. In today's video, I am so excited about. I really rediscovered my love of learning in 2022. I went from having read like maybe 1 or 2 books for the previous like 6 years before that to reading 212 books in 2022, and a huge part of that was me discovering my love of booktube. I found a ton of booktubers who I love over the last year, but Kayla, Gabby, Gavin, and Katie were really the 4 that I watched the most at first, and really helped to kind of shape what the journey of me discovering what books I really loved looked like throughout the year. But hands down, over 2022, Kayla had the most impact on that. When I tell you that I have read all of her videos that she has available at least 2 times, if not more, I'm not exaggerating. Rather than having like The Office or Friends or like Schitt's Creek on in the background, that's what I used to have, it's Kayla playing all the time. I actively watch and then I put them on in the background. I originally started watching her just like so many other people just because I loved her vibe and the vlogs that she was doing. But as I started reading more of her recommendations, I started realizing like how much we had in common with our taste. I wasn't expecting to like a lot of the books that she read because I knew that she talked about them not being as widely liked, but I quickly discovered that I really liked a lot of them. The first notable one I can remember, which wasn't a recommendation, it was her literally dead book club pick, Confessions by Kane Minato.
This is the live show where we're talking about Confessions by Kane Minato.
But that was the first book that I remember being like, oh my god, yes. Oh, that too, and I'm pretty sure she was the person who introduced me to The Cabin at the End of the World by Paul Tremblay that I read a couple months before that, and I loved that book. So that was one of the first like horror books that I loved that I realized not a lot of other people, like it wasn't as widely loved, had pretty low ratings on Goodreads. And that kind of started my journey of getting into more horror books, weird books, and discovering what I loved in those and what didn't work for me. So in today's video, I want to make it my mission to read Kayla's top 10 books of 2022. She just posted her video for me a couple of days ago, and considering just how much she has impacted my reading and my whole year last year, I thought that it was only right that I start off my year really immersing myself in the books that Kayla loves. Now, it would not be a true Books and Lala inspired video if we didn't break down some stats. Kayla is so good at this. I always love how like stat and math focused her vlogs and her like reading wrap-ups are. So I want to go over some stats to compare our reading and start talking about why I think that reading all 10 of hers is a good idea in the first place, especially when on some of the books she says things like this.
And I feel like a disclaimer is needed that my favorites list should not be taken as a recommendation list.
So the first thing that I want to do is compare our reading stats on Goodreads. Now I will say there are some shortcomings with this, okay, because of the way that Goodreads sets up how they compare books between people, but I think it'll at least give us like a baseline to start off with. Kayla and I are 85% similar on the books that we've both rated that are on our shelves. But I feel like the biggest factor to try to figure out if someone's reading taste aligns with mine is not so much in like all of the books that we've given 5 stars to, but specifically the books that we've given 5 stars to that generally have lower ratings, meaning when a lot of other people didn't like it, we both did. And also on the reverse end of that, are there any books that we both rated lowly that other people generally like? And where are the discrepancies between the books that one of us has rated really highly and the other one has rated lower? I'm mainly going to look at the books that we've both rated higher, 4 or 5 stars, that were generally rated lower. So that would be things like The Wild Ones, both of us gave 5 stars to, and that one has 3.69. That was my, I think third or fourth favorite book of the year. And I believe that this was also on one of her favorite books of the year.
In number 9, I'm gonna put the only YA on this list, The Wild Ones by Nafisa Assad.
Comfort Me with Apples is another good one. 3.6 stars. We both gave it 5 stars. I read that book because of Kayla. Absolutely loved it. Another really good example is Catherine House. Both of us gave that 5 stars and it has a 3.11. Pretty low. I also feel like our similar taste in reading comes across in things like The House Across the Lake, which we both gave 5 stars and I know other people didn't like. And we'll talk more about specifics on what is the same and what differs in our reading taste and what I've kind of discovered. But I feel like books like this that generally are not well received but we both love is a really good telling on where our weirdness aligns. But our taste, especially in like weird things, doesn't always align, and I feel like there are some notable differences that we can kind of dissect. One of them was Just Like Home, which was actually one of my favorite books of the year, and I thought for sure Kayla was gonna love this. I read it, I believe, did I read it for her book club or I read it for someone else's book club or someone was just talking about it, and she posted a vlog talking about it and I was like, oh, she's gonna love this. This was weird. And then I think she gave it like 2 stars, which I was shocked by because I definitely thought it was her kind of weirdness. But now that I've watched more of her videos and really thought about it, I think, well, yes, Kayla and I both really like when things get weird or things have weird plot twists, or like she talks about how she just loves when like she's entertained, or when books like make her laugh from how like convoluted or weird it gets. She's also talked about in other vlogs and reviews, and she mentioned this in Just Like Home, that if it's going to get weird, she wants to be able to sit in that weirdness for a while. She doesn't want a tonal shift toward the end of the book that you're not sitting in for a while. She talks about that in her romance vlogs as well, which I can agree on with romance. When she talked about not liking the third act conflict because of that tone shift, it put words to how I have felt about romances and rom-coms that I have felt for years but didn't know how to express. But for me, the weird plot twist worked in Just Like Home, but it didn't work for Kayla. Another instance where I've seen our tastes kind of diverge is really well represented in Our Wives Under the Sea. Now, I will admit that I think I went into this with the wrong expectations, and had I known what I was getting into and had I put off reading this book until a better time, I might have enjoyed it more. But I was so disappointed in this book. I felt like it was pitched as queer horror, but I felt like nothing happened. It made no sense to me. I think I gave it like a 1 or a 2 star, but then Kayla gave it 5 stars and talked about in a recent vlog how she wants to reread it to solidify it as like an all-time favorite. And that's a really good representation of the books Kayla loves, where it's classified as like horror or thriller, but it's more along the like literary lens and just follows like two people, whether it's in a friendship or in a relationship, and their lives, and then there's like a sprinkle of weirdness. Sometimes that works for me, and I'm okay with a slow horror where not a lot happens and it's ambiguous and weird, kind of like Catherine House, where both of us loved that book. But for things like Our Wives Under the Sea, which is a horror book, or The It Girl, which is a thriller that I felt like wasn't thrilling at all, Kayla loved them, I didn't. And the fact that we differ in that is definitely going to come up when we talk about the books on her top 10 list of the year. There's really no way for me to do this video without spoiling her video, but my guess is that if you're watching my video, you probably already watch her and have watched her video, but if you haven't, go click on her video, come back here, and then we'll go over everything. But as a quick refresher, I'm gonna put up a graphic of Kayla's top 10 books of the year. Out of that 10, I've already read 2 of the books. I already planned to read and owned 3 of them. I had actually DNF'd 2 of them, but we'll get to why here in a second. And then 3 of them that I had heard of because I heard of her talking about them, but I didn't own them yet. As far as my interest goes with her top 10, 6 of them I was already actively really interested in. 2 of them I had read and also loved. And then there's 2 that I'm a little bit worried about. For the 2 I DNF'd, it wasn't because I had lost interest, it was actually because my time at the library on both of them had lapsed, so I wasn't able to finish them, and then I had moved on to other things. But it works out because I was liking both of them, and I'm excited to come back. The 2 on this list that I'm a little bit worried about are The Pallbearers Club and Death in Her Hands. Now, The Pallbearers Club, it could go either way. Paul Tremblay, The Cabin at the End of the World, was one of my favorite books of the year. It was in my top 5, so I already know that I love this author. However, Kayla explicitly says this in her video.
I am very hesitant to even include it, and I feel like a disclaimer is needed. So all of you who I know are out there who are going to build a TBR based off of this, don't you dare say I recommended it.
And The Pallbearers Club, along with Death in Her Hands, I think has the potential to fall into that category of where we differ on our taste in books, of like being horror but not horror and nothing really happening and just following either 2 people or 1 person as they're living their lives, and there's a little sprinkle of weirdness. I have more faith in The Pallbearers Club just because I have a history with Paul Tremblay and loving his other works. However, I know nothing about the author of Death in Her Hands, and I'm not sure how that one's gonna go. Now for the overall structure of this reading vlog, Kayla did number these in order for herself from 1 to 10, or 10 to 1 is how she went over it in the video. So I want to come up with my own order as well. So this is my predictions list along with the 2 that I've already read and where I think that they're gonna fit in there. Now, I won't be reading these books in order of like Kayla's list throughout the vlog because it all just depends on when they come into the library and what I'm feeling. I want to give these books the best chance that they have. So let's go ahead and start reading some of Kayla's favorite books. What is this? Hold on. I'm so excited because I completely forgot, and last night I opened up a package and realized that like 2 weeks ago I already ordered this in the mail. So I'm going to go out to breakfast with my mom, and then I'm going to start reading this. I also have the audiobook on Scribd, so I might go back and forth between the 2. I feel like this has the potential to be a really, really good audiobook. Just in case I accidentally called this Jameela Green Doesn't Care and combined it with Delilah Green Doesn't Care, it's Jameela Green Ruins Everything. And this cover stunning. I believe this is supposed to be like a dark comedy. We've got satire in here. Our main girl, Jameela, she's a writer, and it looks like she ends up having to go on a mission to rescue her new friend because he's captured by the CIA because they suspect him of being a terrorist. This is the one that I had already started reading. I don't think I got very far, like maybe 20-ish pages, maybe a little bit more than that. And I was vibing with it, but then my hold ran out at the library. I had to return it. So I'm gonna go to breakfast, start this, and I'll keep you updated. So I made one library trip, went to go get breakfast with my mom. I've been listening to the audiobook for Jameela Green, and I love the book, but the narrator for the audiobook, I don't know if it's intentional, because I know that this is like satire, and Kayla describes it as like super over the top, but the way that she is narrating Jameela's agent, her book agent, but it is making it a not enjoyable experience. However, I think that these next few chapters hopefully don't include her in them, so I'm going to continue listening. But if she comes back, I might have to pause and just read this physically because I don't want that to like affect the experience, because so far the book itself and the rest of the audiobook I'm really loving. And I love cozy mystery, and I know this isn't like a cozy mystery, but like that kind of vibe, I love listening to those on audiobook. I feel like those are perfect for that, especially when I'm running around and doing things. And I have the audiobooks for a couple of the other books, but I really wanted to read this in audio, so we'll see. I'll keep you updated. The biggest winner there they had. I'm so excited. I was on the way to the library to get this, but I've wanted to like own a copy. So for like $2, I think it was even on sale. Yeah, $2. Perfect. Okay, so I've reached about the halfway point with Jameela Green Ruins Everything. I love it so far. It is absolutely ridiculous. It is so over the top, but that's what I look for in like mystery and thriller books. And typical cozy mysteries normally just like don't quite hit that for me because they're not over the top enough. This kind of gives me like Finlay Donovan vibes. You just have to suspend disbelief and go along for the ride. So we're following Jameela, and she's on a mission to get God to finally start listening to her and help promote her book because her book isn't doing very well. So she ends up at a mosque, and there she meets Ibrahim. One thing leads to another, and he ends up being the person who the CIA suspects to be a terrorist. And to give you the vibe for this book, she has made the terrorist organization, the acronym for it is DICK, so that then she can make dick jokes. That's about the vibe that we're on. And honestly, it is just so much fun, and I'm here for it. I am popping back in here, and now that I have finished this book, I think where I'm landing at with this is a 4.5 star. I'm gonna end up rounding it up to a 5 on Goodreads. I really enjoyed this. This was absolutely a wild ride, but I love the way that Zarq and Awaz had conversations about the United States history in the Middle East, while also showing our main character, Jameela Green, on this kind of self-discovery mission. I think that this is a wonderful book. I ended up not only laughing, but also crying by the end of this. I don't think that the humor is going to be for everyone, and typically I wouldn't think that it's my kind of humor, but it worked for me. And I was reading through some of the reviews on Goodreads, and I think that it's really important that we have a conversation about the conversations we're having around books like this, because let's be honest here, white men have been writing satire and dark comedy, dark humor kind of books and producing all types of media in that kind of realm for a very long time, and people eat that shit up. I saw some 1-2-star reviews that were talking about how they just didn't get it, and I just think it's important for us white people to sit down and kind of reflect on that, because this is something that we see a lot in the book review community, where books that are by people of color or marginalized communities that differ from those of us in the privileged majority, they get on average lower reviews, and people commenting on things like just not getting it. And obviously I'm not the first one to ever bring up this conversation. This conversation is really important and big in the book community as well, that we just need to be very conscious about what we mean when we say that, and recognizing that not everything it needs to be made for us because so many things already have been. And that it is not on the minority to educate us or make it make sense to us or to cater to us in that way. But for me, like I said, this is a 4.5 star. I actually rated Finley Donovan 5 stars, but I touched on the fact that I wish I hadn't read the second book because it kind of dampened my perception of the series as a whole and then therefore the first one. I don't know what it would be upon a reread, but right now I would actually put Jameela Green Ruins Everything above Finley Donovan, but I still think I loved Confessions just a little bit more. So I'm gonna put this tentatively at 5. I do realize that putting it at 5 also means that I assume that there's gonna be like 4 or 5 stars at least. But I feel pretty good about that prediction. So right now that puts our ranking here. The next book I'm reading is The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay, so let's see how it goes. I officially started The Pallbearers Club by Paul Tremblay. I'm about 10% in right now, and I know that Kayla mentioned that she recommends, if possible, reading it physically along with listening to the audiobook, so that's what I've been doing. I was a little bit worried about how the formatting would look on the Kindle, because this is kind of like a book within a book, but it is supposed to be a memoir by Art Barbara, our like main character, and he's going through and detailing this club that he started in high school called the Pallbearers Club, where they go and volunteer to be pallbearers at local funerals for people who were unsheltered or didn't have any family to be present there. But then we also have, if you can see, like little writings, and that is from Mercy, who ends up being a character in the book who he's talking about, who is like his best friend. But he left her this memoir of his to read, and she's like writing in her thoughts about it. So I was worried about what that would look like on the Kindle, but so far it's been fine. I'm trying to go into this with realistic expectations, that this is classified as horror, but Kayla says that it's not really horror, it's more of a friendship story. A big plot point of this book is that our main character ends up suspecting that his friend Mercy is a vampire. But it seems like she doesn't know that yet from the little like tidbits that we're getting of her, but he's starting to hint at it in his memoir. Otherwise, we've just kind of been going through the basics, getting to know everyone and his club and things like that. So I don't have a ton of thoughts yet, but I'll keep you updated. Okay, a little halfway mark update on the Pallbearers Club. I can totally see why Kayla loves this so much. It's got 80s vibes, it's got like some weirdness, but you're not sure if it's horror or true or not. And this truly feels like you're reading a memoir where someone's best friend who they thought was a vampire is reading it and like putting in notes. There's like moments where she's trying to defend herself, or she's like, that didn't happen that way. And then there's moments where he's trying to defend himself, where he's like, why would he be making this up? Because if I made it up, I would say this thing, or I would have Mercy have said this, not this. Or he'll admit to like little faults, like, okay, yeah, it might have been a little high, but you tell me if you saw this in the way that I saw it, if you would believe it or not. I think that having the audiobook is key. I don't think I would have liked this experience as much if I didn't have also the audiobook along with it. It's also really cool because this is kind of like multimedia in a sense, where there's a portion where it's like scripted of a tape that they're playing, and on the audiobook version it sounds like they're on a tape, like you're listening to it on a tape. So I don't know if it's so much the story that I'm loving, because for me, like 80s culture, I don't give a shit about. Okay, I don't care. I know that there are a lot of references that are going over my head, but I wouldn't say that that's too heavily impacting my opinion on it. I just think if you're really into that, it would even add extra. But I completely see why people have DNF'd this. And if I went into this thinking it was a horror book about someone who's writing a memoir because their best friend is a vampire, and then I got this, I'd be a little confused. My plan is hopefully I am done filming for the day and I can curl up on the couch and just read this. Here's your reminder to take your medicine. Good morning, friends. So I finished the Pallbearers Club last night. I wish that it was a novella, because for me, the first like 25% and then the last 30% I liked a lot. Dare I say loved. I loved the last 30%. I liked the first 25. And during those moments, I loved the like their bickering back and forth. I loved learning about their relationship. Another thing I want to say, the Kindle situation, is that you can totally read this on the Kindle, okay? And the formatting overall was a lot better than I was worried that it was going to be. It just, you lose a couple of things. One, in the real book, I know that Mercy's comments are printed in red. You don't get Mercy's comments printed in red, obviously. It's like grayscale. But you do get them written out like their handwriting, which is cool. And you do get the like cross throughs and underlines, and you even get like a one instance where she circles something. So you get that whole vibe. The only thing that I don't like. I believe in the original printed out book, Mercy's comments when they're like little and they can fit in the margins are actually in the margins right next to the line. And on the Kindle, you don't have that because you don't have enough room for that. I even tried to change the margins to be like so fucking big on the Kindle to see if it would move them up there. It doesn't. And that's fine whenever it puts Mercy's comments like 1 or 2 lines below where she's like crossed off or commented on. But a lot of times it doesn't do that. It actually ends up putting it like at the end of what it considers to be the paragraph. And sometimes it's like on the next page. So I was listening to the audiobook as I was reading, and she would be saying it in the audiobook, but I wouldn't be able to see what she said. I would just see that she like underlined something. And that was tricky because it just kind of like pulled me out of the story and made me like more aware of the fact that I was reading it on a Kindle. But ultimately, if like that's your option, it's totally doable. It's just like a few little things that you miss from the overall experience. And since that's such a big part of the experience, I thought it was worth noting. But anyway, that doesn't like actually affect my review of the book or anything. And I know I said at the start of this vlog that the fact that there are so many references, like 80s pulp culture references and references to 80s music and things like that, wasn't taking me out of the story. I now think, after reading the whole thing, that not knowing those references did affect my reading of it and did make it a little bit less enjoyable for me.
Well, well, well. How the turntables...
Just because there are so many. Oh my god, these people are obsessed with the 80s, which I guess makes sense because it's supposed to be like a memoir from him being a teenager, but holy fuck. It might not even be all 80s references. It might be 90s, it might be 70s, 60s, I don't know, but I'm pretty sure it's 80s. And that's just not my thing, but I know it's Kayla's thing, so that makes total sense of like why she loved this book so much. I also think had I gone into this book not already hearing people's thoughts and reviews, I would have rated it a lot lower than I'm going to. My expectations, especially since Paul Tremblay's Cabin at the End of the World was one of my top favorite books of last year and probably one of my top favorite books of all time. Had I just like went into this expecting Cabin at the End of the World, I probably would have rated it like 1 or 2 stars. And even now I've been going back and forth in my mind of what I wanted to rate it. There was no point in time where I wished I would have like been able to DNF it or anything. I was vibing, but I also think that's because I had the audiobook. I don't know if I would have been vibing so much without the audiobook. So I think right now I am landing at a 3-star for it. I actually liked it more than I thought that I would. Would I recommend this book? No. Do I understand why Kayla loved it? Absolutely. I'm hopeful that I do like some of his other books and that they're more along that same vibe and things that the feelings I got from Cabin at the End of the World. I'm just like waving this around like it's a fucking weapon. And to be honest, I hope that the books that he publishes in the future are not like this one. Hello, Oliver. Can you see that? Sir, what are you doing? So I would say on our ranking of where we're at right now, I would put this at like number 9. That's also me being hopeful going in that I love all of the other books, but I am still worried about Death on Her Hands, for sure. So I'm leaving room for that. Hi, future Alexa popping in here because I lost most of the clips for Kindred. So you get my check-ins from like halfway on. This ended up being such a good reading experience for me. I do recap like what it is all about even during my check-ins because I start to realize that maybe I lost the footage for it. So I end up going through all of my feelings, but let's go ahead and get into that. So I'm a little bit more than halfway through Kindred right now, and I think that I'm gonna end up listening to the rest of it on audiobook. I just absolutely love it so much. So I'm gonna do my hair while I listen. There's not a lot extra to say right now other than the fact that this book is just like so good. We're following Dana as she's trying to navigate this new world that she is in, trying to figure out how to survive, but also how to make a difference without like negatively impacting the timeline that she's in and then accidentally causing herself to never be born. Hi, Dory. It's obviously heart-wrenching as you assume it would be, but the fact that Olivia E. Butler has combined this feeling of historical fiction with the time travel and the like sci-fi fantasy type feel, but still making it feel so real is incredible. So I'm gonna bleach my hair, continue listening. Oh, hello. Don't mind Dory, she's just trying to eat my camera. And I will keep you all updated.
Frustrated, she took me by the hand and led me out to where Nigel was chopping firewood. She repeated the face-rubbing gesture, and he nodded. Get somebody who makes her living by writing to write some very persuasive letters.
If you are a hairstylist, you're gonna wanna look away. Okay, my methods, while quite dysfunctional appearing, I guess is the word that you would use, unorthodox, it always somehow ends up working, so. You never ever climb up there until I turn the camera on. It's like he needs his moment. Very relatable. So while I was doing my hair last night, I had a little bit of a hang up right as I applied the bleach. Dory, that would be Menace A. Menace B is Oliver, who you see climbing around all the time. Menace A is Dory, and she's the one who likes to eat plastic. I try to keep it away from her, but it's literally like she has a sixth sense. She goes out and just like digs it out of unknown crevices. I don't know. So anyway, she ate a piece of plastic, got sick. She's totally fine. This happens all of the time, okay? And I mean, it happens all the time that she's trying to eat plastic. Most of the time I catch her, but this time she decided to throw up right on the thick shag rug that I have in the living room. So as my bleach was on my hair, I was trying to figure that situation out. But anyway, got that all figured out. Then I thought that I had the toner that I needed to use, that like I wanted to use, and I did, but the bottle was empty. So I had to make do with what I had. So I ended up just using a different one. Then I was worried because it was a bit darker than the one I normally use, so I rinsed it off a little bit too early. But overall, for the fact that there was so much chaos happening during the hair process, I'm happy. And during that whole thing, I was able to finish listening to Kindred, which completely recommend the audiobook. Both the physical and audiobook experiences are great, but the audiobook was so good. And I actually listened to it. I normally listen to audiobooks on anywhere between like 2.3 and 3 times speed. I slowed it down a little bit to like 1.8, and that was perfect for me because it didn't feel so slow that I was like, it felt dragging on. I could still keep my attention. If it's too slow, I actually don't pay attention. It loses me. I can't keep up. 1.8 was like perfect. It just felt like someone was literally, oh, it was just so good. Like telling me the story, it was fantastic. So running theme of this vlog of not knowing whether I explained it very well. So like I mentioned, we follow Dana, who is trying to navigate as she is being thrust back and forth between her time in the 1970s, and then I believe it is the like 1924, I believe is the first time that she arrives back to, and her having to get drawn back to that time anytime that this boy needs saving. And this isn't a spoiler, we find out pretty early on that he is like a distant relative of hers, like an ancestor, and he's destined to grow up to be this plantation owner. And she's just trying to figure out how to survive, but also how to cultivate relationships while she's there. And of course it just touches on some important and amazing conversations, but also such an unexpected part of this that I loved was the relationship that she had with her husband. Their love for each other is beautiful. Like, oh my god, I've read so many romances lately. Well, not so many, okay? I'm figuring out I'm not much of a romance reader, I don't think. Just like typical romance. I need something else with my romance, whether that's fantasy or I'd rather it be a subplot. I guess not romance, but the love and commitment that they had to each other and their relationship was just so beautiful to watch. And I was not expecting that at all. That was just such a great aspect of that story as well. So of course, fantastic, 5 stars. It somehow felt both fast-paced and slow at the same time, but in the best way possible. There was a lot of plot, things were always happening. Of course, we're watching her, she's getting dragged back and forth between time and space and location. This is a classic. Of course, so many other people have already recommended it and read it and loved it. But for this vlog, I totally agree with Kayla. Easy 5 stars. And such a recommendable book, like a book that I'm like, everyone should read this. This is the book that I wish I wish that I would have read it in high school, but I'm also glad that it wasn't a book that I was forced to read in high school, since I automatically just hated most of those. So kind of both. I just wish that like these were the kinds of stories that we were reading about more than just a bunch of white men, you know? I've been going back and forth on where I want to put this tentatively on the list. I know it's somewhere in relation to like Confessions, either that 2nd or 4th spot, and I don't know for sure where I would put it. And it's also so hard because they're just such different stories. Obviously, one is historical fiction, one is like fast-paced, wild thriller. I think for right now, I'm gonna put it in the 4th spot, knowing that like those two are very much close together in my mind right now, and that might change. But I think it is definitely going to end up there toward the top. I did end up starting the 5th season last night because I thought that I was really tired and I was just gonna like go to bed pretty quickly, and then I would just end up reading a few pages of that. Yeah, I might be like 150 pages into the book. I just like absolutely could not put it down. I went into the 5th season knowing very little, to be honest. I think I had heard that it was a mix of post-apocalyptic and fantasy. It's hard to remember the steps when I make up and think about the book that I was reading all at the same time. And then I had also heard that there was just awesome representation to it, and it was a fantastic high fantasy story, which is like all of the things put together that I love. And here's the thing. I would say for the first 50 to 75 pages, I didn't understand what was going on, but I was so in. I was here for it. I was loving everything about it despite having no clue what was happening. And I personally love the writing style. I love multiple points of view. I just feel like it's so much easier to fly through them. I know some people don't like multiple points of view because there's always like one they say that they like the most or something. I love it. I feel like it helps break things up. But this one has like an extra little something because we have multiple points of view, but then we also have the point of view that's told in, I believe it's second person. That's what you call it, where it's you. You did this, you are sitting here. And I think that I've heard people talk about how they didn't like that aspect, but oh my god, I love it. That might be like one of my favorite points of view, especially in a story like this, because it just makes everything feel like it's happening to you. And as someone who is so character driven and vibes driven, feeling like I am that much more in the story and the things are happening to me is incredible, especially in this world where I will say that like this book starts off dark and it has been dark for most of the time, but I love that kind of fantasy story. We start off following this woman who her son has recently been killed and her daughter is missing, and it seems like we're in this world where I think they're called origins and it's called originy, not 100% sure about that. That's like the part of the magic system in here, and that is a group of people who have these like certain powers. You can tell there's a lot of fear around them and discrimination, but also at the same time, the society seems to depend on them in a lot of ways because we're in this world that seems kind of like it could be Earth. And I think that's kind of where that like post-apocalyptic feel comes from, because in little ways it feels like Earth, but in so many other ways it doesn't. And in this world, there has been this 5th season that has come about that seems to bring a lot of death and destruction. There's also this whole like religious aspect that is woven in, and like they keep referencing this like scripture. I don't know if they call it scripture, but that's basically what it is. And I love that in fantasy books, especially when you can tell that the religion has got some issues. There's some toxic shit going on tied to it. I love that. Love it. I would normally curl my hair, but I want to give it a little bit of a rest. And I will keep you all updated along the way as I read and if I end up starting another book as well. So I'm currently watching Reading Sprints with Gavin. Well, technically, I think it's his movie night, but I'm so into the 5th season that I wanted to read instead, so he's treating it like you could do movie night or reading sprints. There was a plot twist that just came up that I was suspecting might be part of this, but I think I kind of got it wrong. But either way, it's like, I love that plot twist. Oh my god, so good. I screamed. So far, I am still loving this. I have about like 150 pages left to go, and I don't have a lot else to update you on right now other than if you are a high fantasy lover and you have not read this yet, go read this. It is so good. The magic system, the world, the people, love it all. What? I don't even know how to process everything. Wow. 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 This was immaculate. Oh my god. I'm gonna have to take some time to process my thoughts on this. So I finished the 5th season, actually not last night, but the night before that, and I just realized that I never actually updated you again after I filmed myself finishing it. Oh my god. Incredible. I figured it was right up my alley. N.K. Jemisin's writing style is just impeccable, and having those different points of view helped kind of move the story along even when it was kind of slower at times, but not in a way that ever felt like it was dragging. I can't wait to read the 2nd and 3rd one. I just want to start on them already. But I'm also a little bit nervous because I know that Kayla said that she didn't love them as much. But for me, it's really unusual to give a first book in a series 5 stars. So the fact that this one was such an easy 5 stars makes me really excited, because usually I end up loving the 2nd and the 3rd or however many books there are in the series even more. So I really can't wait. This is definitely gonna go at the top #1 of my list right now. I honestly don't know how anything would beat this one out, but we'll see. I'm down for loving another one even more. So I think I'm going to start reading Death in Her Hands next. Ooh, that glare. I read a couple of pages, just kind of feel it out first. So I think now is a good time for me to start reading it. It gives me time to keep reading it like in between other books if I need to, or who knows, it's not very long at all. I might end up liking it and flying through it. I'm just intimidated by it a little bit because I don't have the audiobook version of this, and with Pallbearers Club I was nervous about liking it, but I knew at least if it was hard for me to get through, I had the audiobook, which would make it a lot easier. And I am such a mood reader that if I'm not into something or I'm not liking it, or even if I'm liking it but it's just like not the time for me to be reading it, it is so hard to push through it. And a lot of times it gets me back into it if I have the audiobook, but I don't with this one. Like I said, I'm only a couple of pages in, but it seems like we are following a woman. Okay, maybe she does not have a name. We're following her. She's a woman in her 70s. She's going on a walk with her dog in the woods, and she stumbles across this note that says, "Her name was Magda. Nobody will ever know who killed her. It wasn't me. Here is her dead body." And she's just kind of pondering about this note. Who left it? Why did they leave it? What should she do with the note and this information that she has now? I have no idea what genre this book is. I was gonna say, let me look it up, but I also don't know where my phone is. Very on brand for me. There's absolutely no reason why a paragraph should be an entire page long. I've got to get new blinds. The blinds that I have in this house don't even work anyway because the windows that I have, I guess, are like weirdly sized. Instead of getting blinds that were just like a little bit too big, that way at least they covered the edges. The owners of this house, or whoever redid it, decided to just get ones that were like a slightly bit bigger than the inside of the window, but still install them on the outside. So when you look from like any angle other than straight on, there's like a gap like this big between the blinds and the window, so they literally don't even do anything. But either way, I definitely need to get new ones for this one. But I am probably getting ready to go to bed. Before I did that, I wanted to update you because I am on page 155. I'm only on the 5th chapter. Like, I'm getting ready to start the 5th chapter. These chapters are so long. It is truly stream of consciousness. You are just inside. She does have a name. Vesta? Is that it? Yes, Vesta. And is just kind of spiraling, coming up with all of these theories of what happened to this girl. And the thing is that it's not the writing style that I have an issue with. I know a lot of people hate this like stream of consciousness, kind of like you're just truly like you are living in her head with like every thought that she has, including all of like the tangents. I don't mind that at all. It kind of reminds me of like what my ADHD feels like, where it's like all of these thoughts that you're spiraling on, and she is like hyper fixated on this one thing, and then she'll go off onto a tangent, but she like always comes back to this one thing. So that part I actually kind of am into. However, I hate our main character. And it's not even like I hate her so much that it's good, because I do feel like when it comes to this kind of writing style, I either need to have a main character who I like enough or is like weird or so unlikable, so what I meant, that I like being inside their head, or I need her to be just way more unhinged than she is. The amount of unhingedness that we have going on here, it's just to the point that I'm annoyed and frustrated and I don't like her, but not in a good way. And not in a way that's enjoyable, in a way that I'm just like, holy fuck. It's exhausting. And I do want to put it out there that if you're at all sensitive to like fat phobic comments or thoughts or anything, skip this book. And I think that they're in there to try to make her an unlikable character, because I don't think that she's supposed to be, like, I don't think we're supposed to enjoy being inside of her head. It's supposed to feel a little bit unhinged, but it comes up so often. It just, for me, like, pulls me out. There are times where I'm like, okay, I'm kind of like getting into this now, like this is feeling unhinged in a way that I can get into, and then it just like veers off, and I'm like, so for me that's like not quite working. I will say this last chapter I did enjoy a little bit more, so I kind of wonder with this last like half, if she keeps spiraling, if I'll get a little bit more into it. But who knows, maybe this last half will like make up for the rest of it. The fat phobic comments have got to stop though for that to happen, let me tell you.
Like in front of her, because she was her younger sister and she was supposed to be watching her, and the girl got kidnapped.
She goes 19. And I said,
Things took a turn. Okay, I'm not gonna say things took a complete turn. However, I am gonna say, other than the rampant fat phobia in this book, I can contextualize in the sense that like it makes sense for our character and I understand why she like feels that way. I just feel like it was overdone a little bit. Like it was brought up too much. Oh, Oliver, no thank you. Like, we get it. I got it the first like 50 times. I definitely got it the last 50 times. But outside of that, and like the very ending of this, like the very end of this book, the last, like, how much did I have left? Like half, I think, of this. I actually think out of context would have been like a 5-star for me. Here's the thing about this book. I absolutely loathed it for most of the time, but I also kind of loved that I loathed it. And I think that you're supposed to, which like makes me feel like it's so brilliant in that way. I was like scrolling through the reviews trying to figure out my thoughts on this because I have a lot of thoughts. And I'm gonna put this down because it just keeps glaring. And a lot of people in the Goodreads reviews were saying that they didn't get it, they didn't understand the point, that it just felt like meandering and plotless and pointless. I can see the point, I think. I know that Kayla talks about this as like a metaphor for writing, and I like that, and like that was definitely on my mind throughout it. But I also think for me, I got something else out of it, and a lot of that comes from my background and my history with my relationships that I've had. So there was actually a lot about this that I liked, and I liked that it was chaotic and unhinged, and it definitely got more unhinged, and that's what I was hoping for. And I will admit that I truly think the amount and aggressive amount of fat phobia that was in here is kind of what's making it so hard for me to love this as much as I think I normally would have. And I think that it's important that authors can write from perspectives that are not their own, and perspectives and their characters have feelings and opinions and thoughts and make decisions that authors wouldn't agree with. So in no way do I think that the fact that our main character had such terrible traits is a representation of what the author believes. I actually think that there was a lot in the story that was trying to show where that toxicity came from, and therefore have a stance against that, right? But just personally for me, it's so heavily impacted my enjoyment of this book that it makes it hard for me to even know what I would rate it, honestly. Half of this book was like a 1-star, and then like half of this book was a 5-star, but trying to average that out to a 2 or a 3-star feels not right to me. Because if I told you that, if I was like, okay, this book is a 3-star, you would think like, oh, okay, like I liked it, but it was like whatever. But that's not how I feel about this book. I have such passionate feelings about the parts that I loved and the parts that I hated. So I don't think that right now I'm gonna give this a star rating. But also when it comes to trying to rank it on like our ranking system that I've got here, here's the thing, is I feel like I can't put this underneath the Pallbearers Club. Because even though I don't know if the fact that I loved that I hated this book makes up for the fact that I really deeply detested it at times, at least I have strong feelings about this book, you know? The Pallbearers Club was like, at the end of the day, like there were some things that worked, there were a lot of things that didn't. I'm probably not gonna think about that book again a lot after this vlog. This book, I feel like in a year from now, I'm still gonna be thinking about and wondering how I felt about it. Let me look at where our rankings are right now. But would I put this above Finley Donovan? Finley Donovan I loved, but then I hated the second book so much that anytime I think about the first book, I'm like, so it's kind of like I'm comparing the ones that are like, okay, yeah, like they were good, against one that gave me such strong feelings. And for me, I would rather have strong feelings one way or the other, or in this case in both directions about a book, than just feel meh about it, or good about it, or fine about it, you know? Number 6. I'm gonna put it at number 6 for now. Keeping in mind that I just got done reading this book like less than an hour ago. So maybe once I think on it a little bit more, I'll change my mind. But for now, I feel like I would put it above Finley Donovan and the Pallbearers Club because of the strong feelings that it elicited. Do you wanna go for a walk? Yeah? You wanna go for a walk? Okay. Okay, so it is really nice outside today, and I don't know how many more nice days that we're gonna have with winter, so I think Oliver and I are gonna go on a walk, and I'm going to start listening to How High We Go in the Dark, because that is the one I have on an audiobook right now, so I'm really excited. Are you excited about our walk? Okay, so we just got back inside. We didn't walk that long, only like 20 minutes, and when I say that that's not that long, this guy likes to spend like an hour and a half outside if I would let him, but he came back to the door after like 20 minutes. I think it's been a while since we've gone for a walk because it's been so cold, and I think he just wanted to know that he could still go outside. He just wanted a little taste, and then he was good to go. Oliver, did you like our walk? Huh? Dory likes when Oliver and I go for walks because then she knows that she gets treats after, so it's the best part for her. But I only listened to like the first 10 or 15 minutes of How High We Go in the Dark, so I love the audiobook, and it seems like there's going to be tons of different narrators for the different points of view. I honestly don't know a lot about the book going in. I think I've heard that it's kind of sci-fi-esque. Maybe there's like a pathogen or a pandemic that happens, and it's either like a series of short stories or a series of different like stories from different points of view that all end up kind of connecting in the end. It's kind of giving me the same vibes of Sea of Tranquility, which that book was a solid 5-star for me. I'm really excited about this one, and I think I'm going to read along as I listen to the audiobook.
Sweetheart, girl, I don't get as much footage of you as I do your brother. Yeah, you both want love.
Okay, so I finished How High We Go in the Dark, but before I talk about that, I want to give a little bit of an update on where I'm at with like the ranking system, because now that I've had a few days to think on a few of the books, I think I've changed my mind about a few things. And this is where I think I stand right now on the books that I've read. And I actually think I'm going to put Death in Her Hands below Finley Donovan, because I really did love Finley. It's just that it's been a little while, and I don't necessarily think it's going to be something that's going to stick with me for a long time. And since I had such mixed feelings about Death in Her Hands, it doesn't feel right to put it above that one. So I'm going to put it somewhere in between Finley and Pallbearers Club. But I'm also going to shift all of those down, because my hope is that the other books that I read are going to beat out all of those. But anyway, I have finished How High We Go in the Dark. I was trying to listen to it whenever I just got this like urge to completely rearrange my living room furniture. I don't know if I love or hate what I did. I ended up just kind of moving everything around in circles until it almost ended up in the same place, just a little bit different. But I was hoping that I could listen to How High We Go in the Dark while I did that, and I was listening, but I just think that this is so much better when I'm reading it while I'm also listening to the audiobook, because the way that this book is, it's different stories, and then there's like little connections in between, and I was missing those little connections when I was just listening to it. So I ended up just kind of like rereading what I had listened to during that couple of hours, and it just has so much to say about death and hope and our connection as a society and the Asian American experience, but also just being Asian and that experience in this world as well. It is heavy. Especially the first like half of this book. I cried or teared up at least the first 4 stories. Yes, including the pig son story, okay? If you know, you know. And I do think for me that some of like the middle stories kind of fell shorter for me. I don't know if all of them needed to be in there. I did like seeing like the little calls to the connections to the stories we had read, but I definitely think the first set of stories and then the last set of stories were the highlights for me. I was going back and forth between whether this was a 4 or a 5, but I truly think objectively this was like a 5. Yes, there were some stories that I wasn't as into, but I was still into them, and like at no point in time did I want to stop reading this, especially when I went back to listening and physically reading at the same time. I can't wait to read more from Sequoia Nagamatsu, because this was incredible. Don't think it quite beats out the 5th season for me, but I think for right now for me, I'm gonna put it at number 2 on the list. I'm still hopeful that the last 2 books we have to read are going to be awesome. I'm not sure which book I'm going to start on yet. I have a physical copy of both the Book of the Most Precious Substance and a physical copy of Daughter of the Moon Goddess. I don't know if I have the audiobook of either one. I really hope that I have it for Daughter of the Moon Goddess, because that is a thick book. Okay, I don't like reading the whole synopses of books, but I was just like glancing on the back to see what it said. And the first sentence is, "A mysterious book promises unlimited power and unrivaled sexual pleasure." Count me in. Now, I've read Sarah Gran before. I've read Come Closer. That one, I believe, was like a novella, and I loved it. I don't know if this book is horror or not. I would assume so, just because it's Sarah Gran, but I could be very wrong. So far, it's feeling more literary fiction with a touch of magic, possibly. I am on chapter 7, page 47, and so far pretty much all we've done is set the scene with our main character, Lily. Lily is a rare book dealer in New York, and her co-worker slash like a guy who also sells rare books in New York was telling her that he had this buyer that wants this book that he's never really heard of. He doesn't even really know if it exists. Asks her if she can find it, and if so, he'll split the profits with her, because this book dealer wants like is willing to pay high 6 figures or even 7 figures for this book. and it is the Book of the Most Precious Substance. She's trying to Google about it. She can't really find a lot of information, doesn't even know if it's a real thing. Just people talking about it being like a powerful occult book. So that was like half of this so far. The other half was kind of like a long flashback about her and her husband and how she's gotten to where she is now. Because she used to be a writer, now she just deals with books and kind of the whole reasoning behind that.
I just noticed that this was blurbed by two of my favorite authors, Paul Tremblay and Stephen Graham Jones. That should have been all I needed to know that this is in fact horror.
I'm on page 195, so a little over halfway. I loved Come Closer by Sarah Gran, but I remember thinking that the concept itself was the reason I loved it so much, and not so much the execution or the writing style. So I think for me, Sarah Gran has such cool concepts and even cool ideas for where she wants to go with that concept, but the way the story ends up coming together isn't always the most impressive part for me, and I feel like that is true with this book as well. The difference is Come Closer was a novella, even though they kind of follow the same format in the sense I'm getting the same vibe of like there's a book slash, I believe it's a magazine in Come Closer involved, and you're kind of slowly starting to watch these characters unravel. In Come Closer, it's like her slowly unraveling, trying to figure out if she's becoming possessed by a demon. And here, it's like them slowly unraveling as they are looking for this book. So I'm on page like 195, and nothing that I would say is horror has happened, or even necessarily anything that I would say is fantasy. There's like a haze, a sprinkle, not a dab, but I don't want to spend 250 or 300 pages of like build up just for a little bit of horror at the end. This was my issue with Stephen King, although it's on a whole other level, and I'm not comparing this to Stephen King at all. But that book, I felt like I was 500 pages into the book and nothing had happened yet. And I was like, there's no way the ending of this is gonna make up for all of the nothing that has happened. So that's where I'm at now. I'll keep you updated on the last little bit of it. I could eat my words, kind of like I was kind of doing with Death in Her Hands, I hope. I didn't quite read as much yesterday as I thought I was going to. So here's the thing, is I'm kind of on the struggle train right now because there is a nationwide, possibly worldwide shortage of my ADHD medication, and it's been a week. And my pharmacy still doesn't have any, and I can't place my script until the day of because they're not going to fill it early. So there's no way for me to like, this has been going on for months where I've been almost without medication, but I have actually been without medication for the last few days. So it's been a struggle bus. Although I only have like that much left. Yesterday I cleaned my brushes for the first time in like ever. I finished this. I didn't like it. I didn't like it. Ugh, I'm so sad. It was much more literary than horror, in my opinion. And again, I went in not knowing which one it was gonna be, but then there was like all these quotes from Stephen Graham Jones and Paul Tremblay about it being horror and all this stuff, and then it was shelved as horror on Goodreads, and I was like, okay. It's gonna be like Come Closer, that it slowly starts to unravel. The entire plot of this book was like them traveling. They would like travel, they would go to a new place, they would eat, they would talk, they would meet a new person that I didn't care about, and then they would eat some more, and they'd have sex, and then they'd talk, and then they'd travel somewhere else and meet another person and look at another book and complain about how shitty their lives are. And that was literally 90% of the book up until the last like 15 pages. It just felt like it dragged on and on and on and on, and then we got nothing for it. I didn't even get like a good or explosive or weird ending. And then listen, there were tons of sex scenes, which normally I'm here for. But I don't know if it was just the way that they were written or the whole vibe of the book along with the sex scenes, but it did not work for me. This didn't feel very horror to me. I know the interpretation of horror is very loose. I'm sure it is, okay, but it wasn't the kind of horror book I was hoping it was. It was kind of like what I talked about, that Kayla and I differ, where it's not horror and very meh. I think right now I'm gonna land on like a 2-star, only because I didn't like actively hate it, I guess. So I feel like I reserve 1 stars for things that like I actively hate. That this is like bottom of my list. Didn't see that one coming, okay? And honestly, can I complain? Because overall, so many of these books have been a win for me. So it's not like it's the end of the world that this one didn't quite work out. And there's bound to be some that I was not a fan of. But I did not see this one being that one. It being lower than Death in Her Hands and the Pallbearers Club? No. So I am going to continue reading Daughter of the Moon Goddess. I was hoping I could finish it today because tomorrow I'm filming a really super cool video that I think will be out before this one, so I think you'll have already seen it. But it is hopefully reading the entire Wayward Children series, Every Heart a Doorway by Sharon McGuire, in 24 hours. So my hope was that I could finish Daughter of the Moon Goddess before that tomorrow, but it's looking like probably not gonna happen. I'm just starting part 2 of Daughter of the Moon Goddess, so I think that's like 150 pages into it. It's a big book. It's like 500 pages. But it is YA. I didn't know that at first, I don't think, but it is in some aspects reading a little bit like YA, which it is, so like fair, but in the sense of there's a lot that has happened in a very short amount of time, and you're supposed to just kind of like piece all of it together that like lots of time has gone by in what feels like not much time. But I did realize that I think that it is based off of the legend, the story, the myth that An Arrow to the Moon is based off of like the moon goddess and then the sun warrior and him shooting down the 9 suns to leave the one because the 10 suns were like running around destroying, and they were going to destroy the earth. So I was really excited about that because I loved An Arrow to the Moon. And not that I expected this to be the same at all, but just that it was based off of like that same mythology was really cool. So far it's good. I'm interested. Oop. I love the audiobook, but the only tricky part is that it's a little bit different than what is printed, so it's hard to follow along on both. But whoever that narrator is for the audiobook, I think I've listened to a few audiobooks from her before and I love them. So I am going to continue reading that, hopefully get it done tonight, but if not, probably Sunday. Today is Friday. So I am going to go over and hang out with my brother and my mom, hopefully chill out a little bit. I just got this new lipstick. Let's see what it looks like. I also ordered another lipstick from Walmart pickup, and it's not the one that I ordered, but it's fine. The universe wanted me to branch out from my normal nudes. Fair enough. Oh yeah, this is right up my alley. This is not the one, this was the one that I wanted. This is Mink, Revlon Super Luscious Lipstick in Mink. Okay, hi, hello. To be honest, it's been about a week since I last updated you, and I don't remember if I ever updated you on the progress of the Daughter of the Moon Goddess. So I'm gonna update you now because I just finished it. My ADHD medication has been out of stock for a week and a half, so I've been without that, and I kept calling, and she finally said that she thought it was gonna be 2 weeks before they got any more. So I had to hunt down, excuse me. So I was hunting down a pharmacy trying to find one that had any in stock. Finally found one, but it took a couple of days to get that too. So it was really hard for me to concentrate on reading, to be perfectly honest. And even this, like, I felt so bad because I knew there was no reason for it to be so hard for me to concentrate, but I was having to completely reread chapters because I would realize that I was reading, but I wasn't actually like retaining any information. I was in my head while I was reading, but I did finally finish, and I am setting on a 4-star right now. There were just a few things about the writing style that threw me off. I loved the story and the basis of the story. I loved our main character. Xingyan is fantastic, and she's like the main reason that I want to carry on in the duology. Plus it's just a duology. There's only one more. But there were a few just like tropes and kind of like YA things that I didn't like about it and kind of pulled me out, which it's a YA book. I'm not a teenager, therefore not the target audience. So I don't think it's any fault of the book. It was just personal preference. For example, there was a lot of action throughout the story. Like there were little spurts of action to kind of keep you interested. And I liked that, but I felt like because there were so many of them, they had to kind of be short. They were only lasted a couple of pages. And so it didn't feel as impactful for me during those moments that are supposed to be really high intensity. And then there was just a few times that I felt like the author was over explaining things to us that even as a YA reader, we would like understand and be able to pick up on. Like someone would say something and then our main character would like explain the implications of what they just said, even when it was so obvious. Like, so obvious. I genuinely think that this was such a good YA fantasy, so recommendable, and I'm teetering on like 4.5 stars, but right now I'm sitting at 4 stars. Now honestly, I am so exhausted. I don't know where my tripod is, so I'm holding out my big camera. So I'm gonna circle back here in the morning, and that's when we can run through like my final thoughts, my final rankings, compare, and just talk about how overall I thought that this vlog and challenge went. Hi, hello, Future Lexa here. It's actually been a couple of weeks. Things got a little bit hectic there, but I'm back to wrap up this video and review what happened. So I'm gonna pop up a graphic here of my ranking versus Kayla's ranking. Now obviously Kayla's ranking is still a top 10, so even the ones at the bottom are still like her favorite books of the year, whereas the ones at the bottom of mine, I would not consider to be contenders for all-time favorites of the year. I definitely think the 5th season is gonna end up being a favorite book of the year. It might end up being that the series is a favorite series of the year, if not all time. I'm already almost through book 2. I started reading that and I am just, oh my god, loving it so much. I'd already planned on reading the 5th season because I knew it would probably be up my alley, but I am so thankful that this got me to actually sit down and read it. And I'm so glad that I got introduced to N.K. Jemisin through this because, oh, I can't wait to read everything that they've written. I would say out of the 8 books that I ended up reading for this video, these were like the 4 biggest wins for me, obviously with the 5th season at the top. How High We Go in the Dark, I expected to like, but I didn't expect to love it as much as I did. Jameela Green was awesome, and so was Kindred. The only one I don't have a hard copy of that I read is Paul Tremblay, and that's because I own it, but I own it on Kindle. I don't have that here to like hold up. But I would actually say in terms of my expectations, Death in Her Hands and the Pallbearers Club went as I expected them to go, relatively. I didn't expect to have such conflicted feelings on this, but I thought it was one that I was a little bit nervous about, but thought maybe in the back of my mind there could be things that worked for me, and that is the case. And no, I still don't have a rating for that because nothing feels right. I still think about it a lot. After watching Kayla for so long, I know that her reviewing a book 5-star isn't necessarily her recommending the book to a large audience. I understand that like a lot of what she reads isn't usually widely loved and widely recommendable. It has usually a very niche audience. So I never assume that a 5-star from Kayla means that she's recommending it. But I think from this video, we can at least say that there's a very good chance that if Kayla is loving a book, that I will also love the book. It might not be a 5-star, but I'll at least really enjoy it. And that the ones that I probably am not likely to like, I think I'll have a better time now being able to point those out. I already kind of figured which ones that they would be in this, but this gave me a much better understanding of where our tastes differ and where that line of not horror enough resides for me. So if you made it all the way to the end of this video, leave a moon emoji, because we've got like a lot of moons going on in this. Like How High We Go in the Dark has a moon, Daughter of the Moon Goddess, moon. I am so thankful to Kayla and the rest of the booktube community for getting me back into reading and helping me establish my love of reading and my taste. It has truly like changed my life, and now being able to do booktube as well is just so cool. And I love being able to talk about books and share my love of books with you all. So I really appreciate you all being here, and I'll see you next time.